How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Hockeytown Rundown podcast. We are doing a little bit of a relaunch here, so I'm super excited to bring you guys back the podcast. I am joined with my new host today, is Jay Croft. So why don't you introduce yourself? Say hello.
Hey guys, Jay here. I run a podcast called Warm Chord Music Podcast, so that's the only other podcast that I do. But lifelong Wings fan, and excited to be talking to you guys about our favorite hockey team here.
All right, so let's jump right into what we're talking about this week. So we're going to jump in kind of recent performance of the Red Wings, kind of talk about what they're doing in terms of their rebuild, kind of recent performance. So a lot of the things that we kind of wanted to address is just, certain plays, like in certain things we've sort of noticed in the Wings play per se. So what are some of the kind of things that you've noticed in terms of the way the Red Wings have been playing as of late?
Yeah, it's a young team, and I think we saw that after the trade deadline that performance against Montreal is pretty brutal, losing 8-1 like that. But just some of the goals, it's just lack of effort, and we haven't really seen that much from this team this year, other than some other games here and there. Funny enough, against Montreal, I think we got our butts kicked by them earlier this year too. But yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to, reacting to losing a guy like Nyquist that's been with the team and probably helping those young guys out for a while, and Jensen and stuff like that. They didn't respond very well at all to that, and looked better against Phoenix, but still just missing a step. They're not really. You can see they're still not really all there compared to what they were before the trade deadline. Even though they were losing games before. You notice there's a step missing. That's the biggest thing I noticed with those two games.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. I just think there's definitely been a lot of issues kind of adjusting to some of those roster changes. And obviously the lines are all changed up. You've got like Helm up on the first line with Larkin and Mantha. And I think there's just definitely a lot of kind of adjusting they have to do in terms of that. We've obviously seen a lot of different faces on the Red Wings, given kind of the rebuilding that they're going through as of right now in terms of you've seen a lot of call-ups, and there's been things have been kind of all over the place in terms of trying to find their footing, and that's part of the struggle you get with the rebuilding hockey team, obviously, but they definitely looked more lost after the deadline. I think it's difficult to adjust, especially when you're losing one of your better defensemen, and losing one of your best offensive players on the team that you've had this season in Nyquist. So it's definitely, it would be tough for any team to kind of adjust to, and I think it's just one of those things that the Red Wings are going to kind of struggle with throughout the end of the season, is kind of finding their footing. It happens so late in their season, and it's not necessarily something it's going to be tough for them to kind of get over that and recover from that. It's not necessarily something you can just kind of come in and adjust to right away. So that's definitely been a big kind of issue that we've seen there. And obviously we're only 2 games out from the deadline, so we haven't really seen too much. But like I said, there's not really much left of the season. And we've seen, and speaking of kind of roster changes and stuff like that, we've seen some, a little bit of Philip Zadina up on the main roster, and he's looked decent in some of the limited minutes that he's gotten. He plays now on that second line, if I'm not mistaken, with Anthony Ciu and Bertuzzi. So, and I've noticed some things myself, just saying that he definitely looks like he looks like he's in place on the main roster. He definitely looks like he's he's not lost. He looks like he fits in on that main roster, which is really good. I'm kind of excited for the future there, but he's not really getting kind of those minutes. But like we said, we've only seen him for like 3 games, so there hasn't really been a whole lot to necessarily notice from him. But do you have any kind of other thoughts on that, I guess, and sort of like Zadina's recent performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of hard because he comes up during a time where the team is trading off some of their players. Like a guy like Jensen can move the puck up the ice and get the puck up to the forwards. He's playing 20 minutes a night now. He's gone, and Nyquist obviously opens up a spot for him to move up, but you're losing a skilled guy that could play with him. I think he doesn't look lost, but he's been, I would say, unnoticeable at times, and not because of, I think, he's not playing well. Just, I think the state of the team has been such that they've not been able to get him the puck in any really good prime scoring opportunities. I haven't really seen much in the way of, oh man, that was a great shot. He almost scored on that one, or, he hasn't really had a moment where you could kind of point to and say, that's why this kid belongs in, on this team. Right. He hasn't done anything to kind of scream, oh man, they should have, they should have let him make, he should have made the team and been up here all year long. I think
exactly.
I think you're seeing that he is developing. What I really loved about his game against Phoenix, I saw plenty of times where he went back to help the defense out. He's responsible on the defensive side of the puck, and that's what's going to make him be such a valuable player. Is he's not a one-dimensional guy. Like, I hate to say that about Athanasiou, but Athanasiou is like crazy fast, but he leaves a lot. There's a lot left to be desired on the defensive side of his game. Whereas Nyquist seems to get it. Like, hey, when I'm not scoring, I've got to be skating. He stripped the puck away a couple times. He made a couple hits right away. So he looks like, to me, there's something there. You can see why he was drafted where he was, but it's comfort, and this is the kid's first, foray into the NHL. I think he's learning, the lack of time and space that he has, and I think you're just going to see him get better and better and better. No,
absolutely, I completely agree. And it's one of those things where, and that's the part of the reason why he was in Grand Rapids. And I think it's, he's only played a minimal amount of games in the NHL, so it's kind of hard to sort of get noticed and sort of make that instant impact, especially with all the changes going on the team, like you said. So that's definitely tough for him to kind of to go through there.
And he's not really playing with a playmaker right now either,
No, exactly.
Like he's not.
They got him on.
Yeah, AA is a great skater, but he's not really known as a playmaker. He's more of a goal scorer, exactly. and they're trying him out for an extended period of time now on center. So he hasn't been playing center most of the year. So it's like, if you gave him a few more shifts a game with a Larkin, could he get him the puck a little bit more than what he's getting? I just, that's the frustration, is you see him out on the ice and there's a lot of shifts where he's out there and he just doesn't get the puck,
Yeah, exactly. So. And that's just that's just kind of the nature of the line he's on, because he's on the line with Anthony and Bertuzzi, and I wouldn't necessarily. I'm not saying that Bertuzzi isn't a playmaker, but it's one of those things where he necessarily kind of works more. He's kind of more of in front of the net kind of guy. You know what I mean? He's kind of the guy who gets dirty and scores some of those goals, and is able to kind of disrupt things in front of the net rather than kind of set up a play rather. And Anthony C is obviously one of those shoot first kind of speed guys. So it's not necessarily it's not really a good combination for him in terms of having a playmaker. And he ends up playing down with guys like, Abdelkader and stuff like that. And it's tough for him. Again, Abdelkader is not really a playmaker either. So it's tough for him because he's not really getting the puck at all, like you said. And he's just not on a line that is going to kind of elevate him to that level as of right now, at least. So it's just the players he's playing with is, they're not going to sort of set him up.
It's honestly a shame.
Score goals.
It's honestly a shame that Vanek is hurt, because I think Vanek would be the perfect veteran player to put with Zadina right now.
Absolutely.
He doesn't. He's not the greatest influence on the defensive side of the puck, but he definitely could find Zadina out there and get him the puck. And I really think that once he comes back and he's healthy, I think Blashill is going to find a way to get him with Zadina, because I think, that's the thing is he could really use a veteran player on a line with him to help give him some opportunities. And I think that is the one thing that Vanek has been able to do his whole career is he's not only a very good goal scorer, but he's a proven playmaker. Say what you want about the other side of his game, but he can get people the puck.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And that's just, I mean, that was the role he was brought on to, to serve at the Red Wings. He definitely knows his role as a veteran there. And there's a couple other, veterans on the Red Wings hockey team that definitely don't know, not necessarily they don't know their role, but it's tough for them to kind of to find their place, I guess. I mean, I know there's a lot of veterans on the team who struggle, and I wouldn't necessarily give the best example for, some of the other younger guys on the roster. But Vanek has definitely been one of those guys who will, continually both score goals and, set guys up for opportunities, and like I said, injuries on the forefront, like you said, are an issue, obviously, for the Red Wings going forward. Like I said,
I'm surprised they haven't. I'm sorry. I'm surprised they haven't found a way to get Nielsen with him, because Nielsen is a playmaker too. I mean, I just them moving Helm up to that first line. That's again a Blashill thing. I just don't get it. Like,
Yeah, I don't understand that either.
They could put Bertuzzi on that first line. Mm-hmm. That Bertuzzi Mantha Larkin line, it has been potent. I mean, and
it's been really good.
Keep those three guys together. And yes, I do get they want to put AA at center and see how he does. But, you're running like multiple experiments at one time. I mean, we're trying to see what Zadina can do. You're trying to see what AA can do. I mean, maybe have a couple shifts where, you have Nielsen up the center with, AA playing the wing and Zadina playing the other wing, I mean.
No, absolutely.
Try it. But
just try some different combinations, because I know Blash was all about those roster, those line mix-ups and all that stuff like that. So I agree when you're saying, he's trying a bunch of different, combinations. I think there's too many experiments going on at once. He wasn't playing with what was that initial line he played before the Nyquist trade when they played against San Jose? His first game was his. I know he had Abdelkader on the one line, and then who was it Nielsen centering that line, or was he? It was supposed
to be Vanek. I thought it was supposed to be Vanek, Nielsen, and Zadina, but then Vanek got hurt. So,
yeah.
So then the trade deadline happened, and then they moved, Nyquist off the team, and then Zadina took that spot basically. So
yeah.
So I think, like I said, once Vanek comes back, I think you're gonna see him paired with Zadina. They're both Czech players, I mean, he can help him out. I really do think that's the kind of player that needs to be paired with Zadina, is someone that can get him the puck and get him some confidence going into the playoffs in the Grand Rapids. If we could find a way to, feed him a couple really good prime scoring opportunities to get his confidence going up, especially coming into next year, that would be great.
Absolutely. No, because confidence is definitely going to be one of those big things where he just needs to be comfortable with what he's doing, and and he'll find his role eventually. It's just one of those things where obviously he's only going to play 9 games in order to avoid burning that entry level. So
6 games left. 6 games left.
6 left. So I'll be interested to see what the Red Wings are going to do once he's not on, and he gets sent back down ultimately. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of lines they run with that. But like I said, we're just getting a little taste of him, and it's been good to see, to kind of see him up, and I'm hoping that he ends up getting, more of a scoring opportunity. He gets more of those opportunities with the puck, and which we haven't really seen a whole lot of. But it would be nice to see going forward, at least to get him some kind of point on the board, because I know there was a lot of hype around that, when he was drafted. So I'm looking forward to that. If we don't see it in that 9, these last 6 games, I mean, we'll obviously see that in coming seasons. I'm sure he'll play a decent amount of time next season as well on the main roster, and you'll have different lines. You'll have guys like Svechnikov will come back, and and will play some on the main roster next year as well. So it'll definitely be kind of exciting to see some of the lines that they run next year with him especially. So, or with Zadina especially. So I'm definitely excited for the future of Zadina on the main roster. But right now it has not. I guess it's left more to be desired. I would say.
Yeah, I think we just got to give him.
So
we just got to give him some time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that's the best thing you can do. And Blashill has shown that he's he's a development coach, and he'll continue to work with him and kind of build his game as the games go on. Especially even in this 6-game stint, he can definitely learn from some of the things that Blashill puts forward. So, there was another thing that we wanted to touch on. There was a little bit some of the stuff in the news recently that we saw. There was Chris Ilitch was in an interview, and he kind of addressed the Steve Yzerman situation in the sense that he talked about the fact that Yzerman is a free agent he's available. His contract ends in the summer, and what that kind of means in terms of the Red Wings sort of bringing him on in some capacity, not necessarily as a GM, but possibly down the line in the future. What did you kind of grab from that interview and some of the things that you saw on Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, the exact quote was, there's not a lot I can say about that other than I know his contract is expiring this summer. We'll leave it at that. That's actually probably more than what he said in the summer or in the fall when they first announced that Yzerman was going to be stepping down as a GM and just being an advisor or whatever role he has now. Ilitch wouldn't even, he wouldn't even entertain the thought of it. He wouldn't even talk. He pretty much said, I can't talk about, I can't talk about it. He's still with another organization. So I don't know. I think if you read between the lines, between, everything that's been said so far in the media, even the way that Ilitch and even Holland's kind of talked, I think everyone knows that the Red Wings are not going to waste any time in getting Yzerman to come back into the organization in some capacity. I just don't think it's going to be as a GM for the 1 year left that Holland has on his contract. I think they're going to bring him in. They're going to give him, some sort of a role, some sort of a high level role. I don't know if it's going to be president. I don't know if they're going to, I think they want to stay away from that whole, is Ken Holland going to report to Yzerman now? I think they're going to want to stay as far away from that as possible. Let Holland finish out the year at the level he's at. And, I think being what we know about Yzerman and the way he handles himself, I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see or hear a lot from Yzerman for the 1 year that I think he'll be here before Holland's contract runs out. I think he'll be in the background and just kind of blend in. But then I think after that, all bets are off. I think once, because just knowing how the Red Wings operate and all the things that have been said already about how much they love Ken Holland, they're not going to want to cause any waves in the in the news about Holland's being moved aside for Yzerman. I don't see that happening. I don't see Holland getting fired. I don't see him being even asked to step aside for Yzerman. I think they're just going to let him finish out the year and then they'll reevaluate. Does Holland want to stay here? Does he want to be, in a different role? If he's adamant that he's going to be a GM, what's going to happen there? Is he going to go to Seattle? Who knows? But I think for the next year, it's going to be bring Yzerman on and, have him help in whatever role they want him to help in. And then after that, all bets are off. That's kind of where I think it's going.
No, yeah, I completely agree. It's definitely, like you said, it's tough for me to think that they, especially after his tenure and what he's brought to the franchise, it's tough for me to think that they're going to, they would just be like, give him the boot after, especially with 1 year left in his contract. It just doesn't really make sense. And there are certain things that, he might kind of take on almost that advisor role again with like he has with the Lightning currently, he'll kind of takes on something like that with the Red Wings. That position, we're not really sure what capacity he'll necessarily have when he gets brought on, but it's almost inevitable in the fact that he gets brought on to the program. I just not a GM at this point in time. I think people looking into that is, it's definitely exciting to think about that, but it's too. I just think it's not the right time to bring him on. I just don't think the Red Wings would do that, especially with how high they are on Holland. They really like him, and there's definitely not any issue with that. He's definitely done a lot of good things for the franchise, and I think they'll definitely give him a good send off. I just think it would be wrong for them to sort of just kind of leave him hanging if they end up deciding not to have him finish out that last year, which I'm sure they definitely will. So it's one of those things where. At least, like you said, at least they are addressing it. They didn't address it in the fall, like you said, when he was stepping down that GM role. There was a lot of people saying that he was, almost like pretty much going bound. He was bound for Detroit, and he was coming. And then, Holland signed that contract extension as well. So I just definitely don't see them sort of stepping away from Holland that quickly, even in that capacity. I just don't really think. It makes a lot of sense for them to do. As much as it would be nice to have Yzerman in some sort of role, I just don't think the general manager role is right at this time.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think that the Wings are going to waste any time scooping Yzerman up once he becomes available, because first of all, he's home, his contract will be up, he'll be a free agent basically. But you've already heard other teams talking about like trying to get permission from Tampa to talk to him. I'm like, I don't think the Wings are going to want to take any chances with another team trying to woo him away from Detroit. I don't see Yzerman doing that. But like when you heard about Philadelphia trying to see if they could talk to Yzerman, or Edmonton, or there was talk about that. It's like, look, if Yzerman is not going to stay in Florida, in sunny Florida, with no taxes, no state taxes, and a team that he built that has a chance at winning the cup, why the heck would he go to Edmonton, right? To that dumpster fire, so it makes no sense, and so I get the risk is probably low that he's going to go to another organization besides the Red Wings, but I don't think the Wings are going to take that chance. I think they're going to find a way to get, they'll find a spot for him. Marian Ilitch, is not going to let Steve Yzerman walk a second time, but at the same time, the Red Wings organization is one of the few family-run franchises in the NHL. They operate like a family-run business. Loyalty is everything. So to them, right or wrong. So I don't see them letting Holland just, I don't see them just pushing him aside. But honestly, I don't see Holland going anywhere. He might not be the GM after another year, but he doesn't talk like a guy or act like a guy that is thinking about going anywhere. To me, he's the kind of guy that strikes me as, he helped build this organization to what it is. I wouldn't say he was the centerpiece of it by any means, but he helped do it. Now he's helping with this rebuild. I think he wants to, cement his legacy as a Red Wings front office key cog, just like Devellano, and Bowman. I don't think Holland wants to go to Seattle. I think he wants to stay here, and I think the Red Wings are, as long as he wants to stay here, I think the Wings will find a place for him.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things, for sure, that even if he doesn't end up serving in that GM role, which I think obviously he will. I just don't see him moving out of the frame. I just don't really see him going anywhere else.
And I don't have a problem with that. I don't really have a problem with it as long as it means, as long as he's not signing unrestricted free agents anymore. I'm fine with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and I wanted to move on to some of the other comments that he's made. He addressed some of the Jeff Blashill situation that we were talking about earlier, and that Ken Holland doesn't necessarily talk like he's going anywhere anytime soon, which is good. But he definitely talked about a contract extension for Jeff Blashill, and that some stuff like that is in the works, and he likes that he's been good with developing players. So it's one of those things where you're seeing that Blashill could be poised for return as head coach for the Red Wings. So what kind of are your thoughts going forward in terms of like that potential Blashill extension and like what that could mean for the Red Wings going forward?
I was a big Blashill fan. Like, I was in support of that decision when they hired him because, I did see a lot of growth from the guys coming from Grand Rapids at the time he won the Calder Cup there with them. But honestly, I'm kind of on the fence with it. I mean, I don't think he's the coach of the future by any means. I haven't seen enough from him as far as the way he thinks the game, like, and adjustments in game. I just don't feel that he's nearly at the level of some of the better coaches out there. I think development-wise, I mean, you can make the argument that he's had a lot to do with it. But, a guy like Larkin, I mean, how much did Blashill really have to do with Larkin's development? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it'd be unfair for me to say that he had nothing to do with it. Just like the people that bash Holland say he had nothing to do with, the fact that we drafted Datsuk and Zetterberg. I mean, was he in the stands scouting them all day? No, but at the end of the day, he makes those calls. So whatever they're doing to develop Double-A, Mantha, Larkin, you got to give Blashill some credit. Those guys have gotten better. And Larkin has taken another huge step this year, even beyond what he did last year. It's noticeable. He is the best player on that team. But
absolutely,
I wonder what they could do for those guys with a coach that just is a better coach in terms of developing strategies for the breakout, and like the power play and penalty kill continues to be the bottom of the league. I mean, you can't win games when your penalty kill is bottom 5 and so is your power play.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just feel like I don't really have a problem with Blashill coming back for another year. But I think we're going to start to see pretty quickly once this team starts to get, better and start contending. They're going to have to hold him accountable for wins at some point. Because right now, it's almost like they kind of give him a pass on it. He's not being measured by wins and losses. He is playing the young kids, but he's playing the young kids because he doesn't have a choice. I mean, there really isn't many veteran forwards on this team that any coach could justify playing as many minutes or more minutes than not Nyquist, but Larkin and Mantha. I mean, who else is there? There really, yeah, exactly. There really isn't. And and one of those things I wanted to kind of go back and address what you said is the penalty, the power play and the penalty kill. It's one of those things where I've seen countless times where this team, this team does they have to recover from a lot of the penalty kill time, because the team is obviously very young and they're undisciplined, and I think that's one of the things that one of my main issues with Blashill is the fact that he, as good as he is with development, I just think that this hockey team still is so undisciplined in the way that they play. If you watched kind of that first game without Nyquist and Jensen against the Canadians, I mean, they just looked like they had no idea what was going on the ice. It looked like most of them had never played a game in the National Hockey League. So it was just one of those things where, and we've seen it all season too, especially just the amount of penalties they've taken, and it's just it's become one of those things where you've noticed it's not just the youth and the fact that they're undisciplined, because you're going to see some discipline issues in terms of some of the younger guys, especially some of the guys who are learning to play at that level, and they're obviously going to be making some of those mistakes. But it's one of those things where you're seeing way too much of it, and that definitely comes down to coaching on that standpoint. So that's one of my kind of main issues with him, with Blashill there. And I like the point that you're saying. How much
can, he's not really taking much of a hit in terms of wins and losses. A lot of this stuff he's not really having any choices placing with these younger guys. But and a lot of the things I think he's kind of mishandled some of the situations with some of the younger guys. You've seen a lot of the controversy around the way he handled the Dennis Cholowski situation, and
yeah, it was Bush League. That's Bush League. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, man, but when
no, absolutely,
you got some kid that has been good enough to play meaningful minutes the first 50 games or whatever of the year, and then you sit him on the one game that he's going to play in his hometown with his family. Like, I get it. Like, hockey's like the NHL. This is like the pros. This isn't Pee Wee hockey
this
anymore.
Is a business, obviously, but
like, you're telling me that you're telling me that he's like worse than Eriksson right now. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Give me a break. I mean, this, and then he says, basically, without saying, he pretty much says, well, if we could have sat him earlier, we would have, but we couldn't because of injuries. Daly was out, and we couldn't sit him. It's like, look, this team is going nowhere this year, right? So, was it really going to hurt to wait a game?
Yeah, wait one more game. I mean, I completely agree. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I completely agree in that standpoint. And, and another thing, I mean, he had that bobblehead night or whatever that they did. They do the Dennis Cholowski bobblehead night, and he got sent down to Grand Rapids for that game. He wasn't even playing. Like, he didn't even get to see the ice in that game. And I'm just like, some of the situations he's chosen to do, to make there are just, and like you said, it was one of those things where he could have made, what was one game going to do, and he's, not that he hasn't necessarily made an impact in Grand Rapids, and he's done good things there, but it's just, he's played, like you said, he's played a lot better than some of the defensemen on the main roster. He's definitely played better than Jonathan Eriksson, and it's kind of a joke to me in some of those things where, you're seeing, just the way he's handled some of those situations. It's just wrong. Like you said, it's Bush League. It's one of those things, and I understand the NHL is a business, and that's just how things go. But the whole situation was just handled really poorly. I think there were some certain things, and I think they've definitely gotten better. The Michael Rasmussen situation was handled a little. There was some iffiness there with some of the things that he's had earlier in the season, just with him getting benched, and he had a little bit of a stint with Grand Rapids, but I think that was for injury. But regardless. And there's just been some certain just decisions that he's made that I've really questioned, and it's hard for me to kind of grip some of the things that he's done, because it's like you said, the whole Cholowski situation was a mess, and so I mean that's kind of one of the biggest things that I've seen with Blashill. It's just some of his decision making has just not been good, and just his analysis, like his decision like his explanation for some of the decisions that he's made has just not really made a lot of sense, and he hasn't necessarily been held accountable for that, at least in my opinion. But I don't know.
It's lack of accountability for the veteran forwards. I mean, like a guy like Ablocator. I mean, God forbid that you sit him for a game. I mean, he actually did that with Eriksson, which was surprising. Like I was surprised. He finally watched some video and made sure that he paid attention to the fact that Eriksson doesn't belong out there. And I'm being harsh, but it's true. I mean, when you got your veteran defenseman who's, been on this team for 10 years, on the sidewall and a breakout, and doesn't know what to do with the puck and literally passes it to the other team. It's like, what are you doing? Like, how can you justify, playing a guy like that, or a guy like, in some cases, Ablocator? It just puzzles me. They literally just do not hold the veteran players accountable at all. But yet, if last year, if AA makes a mistake, they're basically going to sit them. I get it. They're trying to develop the future of this team, but these guys got to play, and they got to make mistakes. And when you're losing games 8-1 with, a mostly veteran defense, come on. You tell me you can't find a spot for Dennis Cholowski on this defense? really.
Yeah, exactly. I completely understand. And, I've heard some counter argument to that saying, oh, well, they can stick guys like Chalosky and Anthony CU because the younger guys can learn and the veterans won't. Like, it's one of those things. But, again, I just think there's just too much of a main issue for me just saying, oh, like, I just don't understand how that's an excuse for no accountability whatsoever for veterans because it just serves a bad example. If you go out and you see a guy like Advocator getting, more minutes than a guy like Anthony CU on the ice, which he was earlier this season, and Advocator just was not kind of producing that same amount of play, that same level of play with the minutes he was receiving. Same thing with Erickson. I mean, what kind of lesson does that send to, or what kind of message does that send to some of your younger guys saying, you're playing better than this other defenseman because his, since he's a veteran, he's gonna get more ice time than you, even if you're playing better, the accountability just isn't there. And, and like I said, it's definitely a learning experience. And, that may be Blashill's way of developing his players and, kind of instilling that. But I just don't really think, like you said, that accountability is there for some of those veterans who are, continually struggling to play good hockey games. And it's just so tough because they're sitting there and you don't really know what to do with them. Obviously, a lot of these guys are signed to massive contracts, and like
like
we brought up multiple examples of Erickson and Advocator with their awful contracts that Ken Holland has signed. Yeah, but it's just one of those things where you can't do anything with them, so you have to give them some form of minutes because it's really all you have. You can't move them or do anything else with them, so it puts them in such a tough situation. And it's one of those things where they'll have to, just do what they can with that. But I completely agree, saying there needs to be more accountability for some of the veterans there, as at least something. And we've seen a little bit, like you said, with Erickson, but there needs to be more, at least I think. And I think that's one of the biggest things. One of my biggest issues with Jeff Blashill is lack of accountability for both him and for some of the veteran presence on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, you can say, that he's developed these kids, and you can say, oh, the team is, on most nights they've shown a lot of effort, and the effort, even when we've been losing, the effort's been there. But the effort wasn't there when they lost 8-1. It wasn't there when they got their butts kicked by Chicago 6 whatever it was. It wasn't there earlier when they got whooped by Montreal. I mean, there's been plenty of games in the past year or two where they've got their clock clean and they look like they didn't even belong there. I mean, how many times have you heard Cronwall and Larkin, some of these other players, basically call each other, the team out, saying it's just not, like, at what point do you look back and say, okay, well, is this coach really the right guy? I don't know, man. Like, we've been blessed in Detroit to have some of the best coaches in hockey over the past 20 years, but I don't know that I would put Jeff Blashill in that conversation. And it's a shame because I really thought highly of him when he came on board, but I just haven't seen the team is very predictable to me. Like, it seems very, like I said, that breakout to me is a problem. I mean, every team knows what they're going to do. They're going to set a guy behind the net. They're going to have, somebody on the sidewall standing still. It basically gives you no chance to maintain possession through the neutral zone into the other team's zone because the other team's defense is basically standing right there. We dump the puck in and they grab it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've watched our breakout just basically give the puck to the other team and hope they turn it over so that, Larkin or Double A can go streaking up the middle for a breakaway. A lot of times that's our offense is, and it's frustrating to see a team like Chicago play the way that the Wings used to play. And Chicago's not even a good team this year.
No. Yeah.
And they make
but I mean,
and they make it look like they invented puck possession hockey. It's infuriating.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's frustrating to watch the Red Wings offense at times because the Red Wings offense is a lot of the things, that ends up saving the rest of the team. I mean, we've seen some, and I wouldn't necessarily say subpar goaltending this season, but, Jimmy Howard was, he's had some questionable games this season, and obviously you got Bernier, who's not necessarily a solid backup, and I think goaltending is kind of an issue for the Red Wings going forward. But obviously, their defense has been absolutely abysmal through parts of the season, and that's just so tough because, like I said, a lot of the offense does hide a lot of those performances from the defense and goaltending and stuff like that. But when the offense is bad, the whole team is bad, and you can just easily tell. It's all around. You'll look at the Red Wings, and if they're not having a strong offensive performance, and the entire team just looks awful. It's really bad. So it's definitely noticeable. It's a pretty big sore on it's a pretty big eyesore on all sides of the puck for the Red Wings, and you're going to see that with a rebuilding hockey team. But it's definitely frustrating hockey to watch. Especially just with how predictable the Red Wings offense is. A lot of it's very easy to game plan for, and it's tough for, you'll see.
It's sloppy,
Yeah, it is. It really is sloppy.
that's the thing that is frustrating to watch is, I mean, I grew up during the Dead Wings era, so I was fortunate enough to witness the rebuild at that time and see the team, become what everyone knows as is a dynasty back in the 90s and early 2000s. And it, I used to watch these tape to tape passes, not even from the Russian Five, but even guys like Darren McCarty, who is more of a blue collar player. I mean, the skill level that team had. What's frustrating is the defense we have really doesn't allow for us to play that puck possession hockey that everyone in Detroit has grown to love and watched other teams take that. I just hope that this team, with all the draft picks that they're accumulating, and we'll get into the draft in a little bit, I know, looking forward at that, but I really hope that, guys like Cholowski, who looks like he can get the puck up to the forwards, Hronek, Jared McIsaac, Gustav Lidstrom out in Sweden, these guys, along with a guy like DeKaiser, can really hopefully they're the answer, because if not, we're in trouble for a long time, because we have to get this defense rebuilt and to the point where they can move the puck up and get the puck on the stick cleanly during a breakout, so that we don't have to dump and chase all game, because it doesn't work, especially when you don't have really, we've got speed, but it's mostly Double A and Larkin. So they've got to find a way to get that defense rebuilt during this era of the rebuild, basically before it's too late, before you have guys like Mantha and Double A making a ton of money and them having to make decisions on those guys. They've got to get this defense rebuilt and start playing puck possession hockey again, or you're just not going to get the most out of all these forwards that we're drafting, like Zadina.
Yeah, I completely agree. So like you were saying, we can you were talking about some of the draft picks that the Red Wings have sort of acquired, as of late, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about the trade deadline. So the first trade that was obviously went through before the deadline was Nick Jensen, and we talked about how the Red Wings have struggled to kind of find their footing, especially after they trade a lot of these guys. But the Nick Jensen trade was definitely, in my eyes, it was a good one, just partially because they did end up getting that second-round pick. I think they did end up compromising a little bit for the fact that it was a 2020 second-round pick, but I'm still glad they ended up getting a second for him. I knew there was a lot of rumors going around that they were only going to get a third for him. So the fact that they got a second, and they got Madison Bowie in return, a young defenseman in return for that, I just think the return there was really good for Jensen. We've only seen a little bit of Bowie, and he's sort of playing that third line defense. But there's obviously some growing thoughts kind of there with that going. I think the Red Wings also sent the 2019 fifth over to I can't even think of it.
Washington.
It was Washington.
Yeah, I don't really. I have no problem with that. I mean, the chances that fifth round pick turns into anything of note is unlikely. The percentages are in the Red Wings' favor, definitely when it comes to gaining a second round pick out of that. So I don't really know. I'd be curious to find out how that conversation went down between, is it McClellan, or I don't know if that's the GM of Washington or not, but it'd be interesting to hear how that conversation went, where it's like, Ken, I'm sorry, we're not making this deal without you giving us that 5th rounder. So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of
Yeah.
wonder where that comes in. If it's just kind of like, hey, we got to make this look like we got a little bit more. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is, they get a 2nd round pick. I think it's actually smart that they did this because with the 2nd round being in 2020, because we already know Washington is a cup contender again, right?
Yeah.
We already know that 2nd rounder, if it was in 2019, you're talking about, within the last 5 to 7 picks of the 2nd round. Who knows what Washington's going to look like in another year, though? I mean,
Exactly.
another long playoff run. We saw what's happened to Chicago and LA. I mean, I don't know what their free agency situation looks like. What UFAs they're going to have. But I mean, they signed Carlson to a big deal. Obviously, Ovechkin continues to be dominant. They just signed Jensen to that deal, which was part of what they wanted to do with Jensen is also get him signed. Who knows what that team really is going to be like in another year? That 2nd round pick in 2020 could be higher than what it would be if they got it this year. So I'm totally okay with it. To me, I'm really curious to find out what happens with this Madison Bowie kid, because he's still 23. He's a big boy. The Wings know a lot about him. It was the same draft year, I think, as Mantha.
Same draft year as Mantha.
Yeah, so they scouted him heavily because I think it's Finley and I forget the head scout's name. They're both based in that area, that area, and they scout the WHL quite a bit, so they know a lot about this kid. And I think they're hoping that. I think honestly, if they're being honest with themselves, I think they're hoping that this could be a really good 3rd pairing guy for the rebuild. That's and I think they want to see, because of his skating and his ability to get the puck up the ice, I think they just really want to focus on making him kind of like a DeKaiser, like more of a shutdown type guy that can get the puck up the ice. I don't think they're really looking for him to produce a ton of offense for them.
No, yeah, I completely agree. And, it's one of those things where he wasn't necessarily a big offensive guy in Washington either, and in what he played. But, I mean, he was definitely, kind of that sort of, like you said, the kind of that 3rd line defenseman that they're looking for, and more of that guy who's going to be more of a physical defenseman on that end.
He was in juniors, though. In juniors, he was a big point producer. So, I mean,
he was.
If he's able to get the puck up the ice, I mean, that's what we were talking about before is, let's get some guys back there that, obviously can defend, but can get the puck to the forwards. That's what we've not been, all these other guys we've drafted, Chase, in the last so many years, have just not turned out have not developed, whether it's Ouellette or Sproul or Brendan Smith or Jakob Kindle.
Yeah.
I mean, look how many misses we've had. And that's really why this team is struggling so much, is that defense. They've just not been able to rebuild it.
No, yeah, I completely agree. And, and it's one of those things where I just think, I heard a lot of people who are kind of not necessarily iffy on this trade, but I mean, this is just for me, this is a massive win for the Red Wings, because they get a young defensive prospect that they really like. They've had their eyes on for a while. They get that 2nd round pick, and it was for it was for someone who's going to, Nick Jensen was going to be an unrestricted free agent, and I really don't think they're going to look to re-sign him, because I think he's 28, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. By the time this rebuild is not done, but by the time this team is realistically challenging for a long playoff run, you're looking at a 32-year-old Nick Jensen.
Exactly, and that's one of the things where I've seen where I was surprised at the Washington re-signing. They signed to a 4-year contract. I mean, he'll be 32 by the time that deal's done. And they're trying to get out as much as they can with them.
It's their window, though. This is their window.
It's their window.
It's their window, and they don't care what Nick Jensen looks like at 33, 34, because they're probably not going to be re-signing him after this deal's
Yeah.
up. So, they get a semi-cheap, 4 or 5 number 4 or 5 defenseman that, I think they're actually playing him with, are they playing him with Carlson? Is he playing on the right side with Carlson, or is Carlson a right? I don't know if Carlson's a right-hander or not, but
that's a good question. I honestly haven't seen, but
he's playing 20 minutes a night in Detroit. So I know one of the big reasons that they wanted to get him is because they knew that he could eat up minutes in Washington. So I don't think they're signing him to a, what is it, $2.5 million a year for 5 years. I think so. I don't think they're signing him to a deal like that for him to play 10 minutes a night.
Yeah, exactly. So then following the Nyquist trade, we were the Red Wings ended up trading him to San Jose. It was the game after they played against San Jose, I believe. But he now plays with the Sharks, which is kind of funny. I saw something kind of going around Twitter with the fact that he did that little segment that he said he was afraid of sharks. And that was just kind of funny that he ended up going to San Jose. But regardless, they ended up getting a 2019 second-round pick for him, and then a conditional 2020 third-round pick as well for Nyquist, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. If the conditions are it's a third-rounder, but if San Jose either makes the Stanley Cup playoff, or if they make the Stanley Cup round, or if they re-sign Nyquist, that turns into a second in 2020.
Okay. So, and again, that's another really good trade for the Red Wings, I think. I know there were a lot of people saying that they were kind of concerned with the fact that they didn't get a first-rounder for Nyquist. I saw that all over social media. Is the fact that
I was hoping
it was a big issue that I was a little bit too, and I think everyone was. But in terms of what they ended up getting, it was pretty good for what they got.
Well, Zuccarello got a second, and it's a very similar.
Exactly.
I think that pretty much set the market for that that level of forward. And look, I mean, if he had a year left on his contract, if we're talking about a center, it's a whole nother story. So he's more of a playmaker than a goal scorer. He's not the biggest guy. He's not, he's very defensively responsible. I always like that about Gus Nyquist, but he's, he is what he is, man. I mean, he's a good second line forward that can put some pucks, in the net, that has a good hockey IQ and plays defensively responsible. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of guys out there like him. So, to expect a first-round pick, I think a lot of people thought he would get that first-round pick when Boyle, I think, got a second or a third when he went to Nashville?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people thought.
I think it was a second. But.
Yeah, I thought he was going to get. I mean, well, if he's going to get a second, he's got to be worth the first. At the end of the day, I mean, he's worth whatever someone's going to pay for him. That's really.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about that. So I'm good with it. I think. Again, it just gives us more cracks at the draft come this summer.
No, yeah, absolutely. It sets them up they now have 3 second-round picks in 2019.
Right.
So that'll be definitely big for them. We talked about this earlier, and the fact that the Red Wings, if they really like a prospect towards the bottom end of the first round, they could trade back up in the first round if they want. But I just think it makes the most sense to kind of stay in the second round and use all 3 of those picks and kind of execute that properly. And, just take a stab at having all 3 of those in the sense that, they'll have 3 attempts to make, some really solid picks in the second round. You said earlier, like a guy like Nikita Kucherov was drafted in the second round, Shea Weber, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a history of high-end players drafted in the second round. I mean, it all comes down to, scouting and sometimes it's luck. It just depends on, we just don't want to reach for guys. And if you're drafting for skill, I think, look at what they did last year's draft. second round looks like a success. I mean, Berggren got hurt, so it's kind of hard to tell, how his development was going. But in camp, he looked pretty darn good. And
yeah, absolutely.
And obviously, McIsaac is the top scoring defenseman in the QM in the Quebec Major Junior League right now, I think.
Yep.
So
Halifax. So
yeah. So I mean, already, second rounders are, now it's a late second rounder as well as the second rounder they got last year for Tatar, but still, I mean, you're talking, they're gonna have three picks in the top 60 of the draft or something like that this year. So that's pretty darn good. I mean, I'm
Yep.
The only thing I'd say, is it would have been nice to get that first for Nyquist, but what I think would be really interesting though, and I want to see what you think about this. He submitted a list of teams that he would accept the trade to. And there was no report on that he actually nixed a trade, so I don't think that was an issue. But there were some teams that he did not want to go to. Where do you think he did not want to go to? I'm not saying they wanted to get him, but I would bet you one of those teams was Toronto.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure Toronto. And what Toronto showed, I know Babcock showed interest in who else? It was De Kaiser, I think it was.
Glendening, but
Glendening, that's who it was.
That was more last year than this year. You heard a lot more rumblings about it last year.
But I definitely. I know there were a couple teams. I don't really know if he ended up, nixing any trades, but I heard Boston was interested in Nyquist. And I can't remember off the top of my head some of the other teams that were interested, but Toronto definitely would have been interesting if. One of my issues, I didn't necessarily one of my main issues, the fact that he went to the Sharks, was the fact that they didn't really have a first round pick until 2021, I think it was. So I know the Sharks were interested earlier. I heard rumors about it, and I was like, I don't want him to go to the Sharks because if they're going to get a first round pick for him, that's not where I want him to go. But at the end of the day, I guess, it's more favorable than him staying in the East. It's good that he went over to the Western Conference rather than, having to see him more often in the East. So
I hope for his sake that he has a nice long playoff run.
Absolutely.
Has a chance to make himself a boatload of money so that Ken Holland doesn't re-sign him. And I really hope for his sake that he has he has a lot of success in the playoffs, because you know what, it's very likely that he could be getting a nice big payday from a team that is in a similar situation as the Red Wings next year, and it could be like an Edmonton or a team that needs forward depth that's willing to pay up for it. And I just don't think that's going to be the Red Wings. I think this is the end of the Nyquist chapter for Detroit. So
yeah, and it's a little bit unfortunate because guys like Tatar and Nyquist were kind of poised to be that sort of next man up and big pieces in the Red Wings franchise, and they're now both gone. So it's definitely upsetting to see those kind of pieces traded away. But at the end of the year, at the end of the day, I mean, it was the right move, I think. In terms of, I just don't really think they were planning on bringing him back in the offseason, given the fact that, again, he was going to be a free agent. So it would have been tough for me to see them bringing him back. And he was obviously a consistent point scorer, but again, it's one of those things where he's older and signing into a big contract, because he was he's on pace for 70 points, I think, this season. So that would have earned him a decent amount of money in terms of a contract. And I just don't really know if the Red Wings, it would have been smart for them to kind of bring him on for that kind of contract going forward, given just the fact of what they're doing, I guess, with this hockey team. So,
he's going to get paid. It's just
he'll get paid for sure.
It's going to have to be by a team that values what he brings, which honestly is secondary scoring. It's a team. The team that signs him is going to be a team that needs secondary scoring, and that's what he's going to bring to the table. But he's not done it in the playoffs, so we'll see how he does this year with a team that has a chance to go far.
Mm-hmm. And if that team ends up going far, I mean, that only bodes well for the Red Wings, because in terms of, like you said before, it keeps them away from Nyquist, but it also helps with the conditions. I mean, if the Sharks end up making the Stanley Cup final this year, which they could easily make a run. I mean, that's a very talented hockey team. They make, if they make that Stanley Cup final, that third round pick in 2020 becomes another second round pick. So that would be really nice for the Red Wings as well going forward. So definitely a good thing going for there.
I would tell folks, one thing I would recommend with now Tatar being gone and Nyquist being gone, Jensen, Mrazek. There's an article that Max Bultman wrote on The Athletic. If you're not a subscriber, I would suggest checking it out. It's really interesting. Basically, it's about the new generation taking charge of the Red Wings, and it's the whole thing about those players I just mentioned that were supposed to be the next generation after Zetterberg and Datsuk taking over, and basically how it really explains why this rebuild is happening is because those players just never developed into what everyone thought they were going to, and that goes along with all those defensemen we talked about earlier, like Sproul and Brendan Smith and Ouellette and all those guys. It's really a whole generation of players between the Zadina, Larkin, Mantha, all those guys, and the Nyquist and Zetterberg, the Datsuk and Zetterberg generation. It just failed to really move forward, and that's why we are where we are. It's a pretty interesting article. Check it out though if you get a chance.
We want to transition a little bit. We were talking about the Sharks and them making kind of a deep run. Are there any other teams you're keeping your eye on in terms of the playoffs? Like, other than the Red Wings, are there any kind of teams that you've looked at and said, I wouldn't be, it'd be nice to kind of root for this team going into the playoffs given the current scene right now? It's
a pretty easy answer for me. That's Calgary. I'd
agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up being a Calgary fan. When the Red Wings were not good, they were kind of like my other team to root for as a kid, and they had Theo Fleury, and there's a lot of parallels. They got Johnny Gaudreau, who's that little guy that just doesn't stop, that, can put points up. So they're exciting. They're exciting to me. I don't think their goaltending is where it needs to be. But they do have really high-end defense, so that's going to help. And obviously Tampa. I mean, Yzerman built that team pretty much. They're dominant. It kind of goes to look. They are. I don't want them to win the 60-second game and take the Red Wings record away for wins, but I would be happy to see a repeat of the 2004 Stanley Cup Finals between Tampa and Calgary. So those would be my two teams that I'm really pulling for.
In terms of teams that I'm kind of looking at, I really like Winnipeg. Winnipeg is one of those teams that I've kind of kept my eye on over in the Central Division. I actually really do like the Central Division a lot in terms of the Western Conference. The Western Conference has been kind of all over the place, but I mean the Jets have just been a really consistent hockey team this season. Patrick Laine. There's a lot of talks of him kind of being inconsistent, and but he's there's a lot of players over in Winnipeg that I just really like. I think it'd kind of be cool to see Winnipeg make a decent run for the Cup. They're just such a fun hockey team to watch, especially when they've played against the Red Wings this season. It's been fun to watch some of those guys over there. Another guy I've been keeping my eye on is, I'm not sure if you've heard him, is Jordan Binnington. He's the new goaltender for the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah.
He's been really, really impressive, and I think that's one of the main reasons I've liked kind of watching the St. Louis Blues. They've been a really good hockey team as well, and they've kind of solidified themselves in, sort of that third playoff spot, and I hope they kind of stay there. I hope they don't really fall into the wild card there. I think how far are they? I think they're sitting at 74 points right now. So, I said,
they were a dumpster fire earlier this year, man. Like
they were a mess.
The turnaround has been amazing. I mean, that's absolutely. Just crazy.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, they've definitely been a fun team to kind of watch turn around. And like I said, like you said, there was a lot of struggles early in the season, but it's nice to see them kind of come back and kind of make it a resurgence. Because I know, like I said, this Jordan Binnington kid I'm really high on. I know there's been a lot of talks about Carter Hart and with the Flyers, and he's been kind of the main focal point at goaltender. But Binnington is definitely someone that we should be keeping our eyes on as well in terms of the playoffs coming up soon. So those are kind of some of the teams I've been keeping my eyes on there. Really excited for some of those guys, some of those teams going forward. So definitely looking forward to the NHL playoffs.
What would be great, Chase, is if both Pittsburgh and Chicago either don't make the playoffs by the skin of their teeth or barely make it in and get killed in the first round. And that just means that I don't want them getting anywhere close to that number 1 or number 2 draft pick. Okay, let's keep Jack Hughes and Capo Caco away from Chicago and Pittsburgh. They don't need any more handouts. They got extremely lucky in those draft years. And all the power to them, but I don't want them anywhere near those top guys. That's all I'm asking for.
No, absolutely. I completely agree on that standpoint. Because if you look at it, the Penguins currently hold that number 1 wildcard spot. But like I said, it's a tight race in the Eastern Conference. But I mean, both wildcard races in both of the conferences are very close. I think Chicago is 7 points out of the second wild card spot. So they said it's 63. So I think it's more believable to see the Penguins. The Penguins actually have a better chance of losing their playoff spot, I think, because the Blue Jackets are only 2 points behind them. They're at 75, and the Penguins and Canadians are tied at 77. So that race will definitely be close. I think the Blue Jackets could, make a good run, especially with all the trades they've made. I think they could possibly knock the Penguins out of that wild card spot as well. So
right now Chicago's getting a little too close to the top of the lottery for my liking. They're sitting,
I know
they're sitting at 8th according to the Tankathon website, which I know we wanted to talk about here, but they're getting a little too close for comfort for me.
Yeah, I know 8 is a little high there for me. I really don't like. I know the Red Wings have been a little bit unlucky, especially last year. They were one of the worst teams again last year, and they ended up falling down to 6. So for Chicago to kind of jump them in the draft at all would be a really big disappointment. For them to even have a shot at some of the top picks there, the lottery pick, the lottery system, I've kind of had some issues with. But again, there's nothing we can really do about that. But if you want to jump in and kind of start talking about some of the prospects that the Red Wings are kind of after, I know we obviously already talked about Jack Hughes and Capo Caco. Obviously, big, pretty easy prospects there for the Red Wings to get if they land that 1 or 2 spot. Pretty easy decision there for the Red Wings. Because Capo Caco, even if the Red Wings don't get Jack Hughes, I mean, he is an excellent consolation prize for the Red Wings. Someone who could probably come in right away and make an impact. And he definitely has really good size, and he's definitely someone I'd be liking to land if the Red Wings can't get that first overall pick, which would be kind of tough for me to see them getting. But I think Capo Caco would be an excellent addition to the Red Wings roster.
Yeah, I just wish he was a center.
Yeah, me too.
but I mean, he looks like the real deal. 6'4", 207 pounds, playing with men already, dominating at the international level. Scored the gold medal. Scored the winning goal for the gold medal game for Finland. I mean, he looks like he's really going to be the number 2 guy here, and it's a lot closer than what people were saying it was this time last year. But I think it has more to do with what he's done to elevate his draft status versus Jack Hughes not playing well, and Jack Hughes has had some injuries that's kind of hurt him a little bit. But it's pretty obvious from what everyone's saying. Jack Hughes 1, Caco 2. Why don't we run the draft simulator here and see what we end up
Yeah,
with.
so let's.
You can run it on your end, and I'll run it on my end. Let's see what we get.
Okay.
All right. So 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Oh, jeez. I'm not liking my results as much here.
You won't believe what. You won't believe who got number 1 on my end.
Oh, don't even tell me.
You know it. You know who it's going to be. No, it's almost even worse.
Almost worse than Chicago? Oh, man.
Not because we hate the team, but because they just, no matter, they always get that top pick and they can never figure out what to do with it.
Is it Montreal?
Edmonton Oilers.
Oh my God, Edmonton. Oh my goodness.
Moves up 6 spots to get Jack Hughes.
Holy cow.
But the good side of this is the Wings stay at number 2 and get Kakko.
Okay.
And Chicago stayed put at 8. So I'll kind of walk. Okay. I'll show you what I got. Yeah, what do you got? What do you have?
Yeah, go ahead. Unfortunately, the Red Wings. So number 1, jumping 5 spots is Vancouver. So they get Jack Hughes, and then the Arizona Coyotes jump 11 spots to 2 to draft Kaapo Kakko.
Oh
and the
my
Red Wings
gosh.
actually fall. And the Red Wings actually fall down to 5 in mine, and it has them grabbing Bowen Byram. So, and then it says Chicago here falls down to 9. They fall 1 spot, but the Red Wings fell 3 spots in mine. Oh, I know the 5 is the worst case scenario. I think that's the farthest they can fall, but obviously there you would hate to see them fall to 5. But yeah, kind of go over some of the things that you see in yours.
Well, 5 wouldn't be a problem because you're
it's not a huge problem.
You're still getting a crack at one of the 2 other centers, Dylan Cousins or Cousins, however you say it, or Kirby Dach. I kind of prefer Kirby Dach personally, but Jack Hughes number 1 to Edmonton, Kaapo Kakko number 2 to the Red Wings, Vasily Podkolzin for Vancouver, who moves up 3 spots in mine.
Okay.
Dylan Cousins to the Avalanche, and that's the Avalanche pick that they got from Ottawa.
Okay.
That was number 1 originally, and then or will be. And then LA gets Kirby Dach, which obviously is going to help with their rebuild. And Anaheim is getting Bowen Byram, and that's those are the guys that we kind of talked about earlier today. I don't know much about. I know Alex Turcotte and Trevor Zegras both come from the USA team. They went 7, 8, and Matthew Boldy went 9. So I'd be fine with this if it works out that way. Just because Kakko is supposed to be such a good player, but Edmonton,
absolutely.
But Edmonton, how can you have? That means that they would have Jack Hughes and McDavid on the same team. Like if you can't figure out how to win with a 1-2 center set up like that, you've got problems. You've got
you've got so many issues there. Oh my goodness. That would just be brutal. I can't even believe they got the first overall pick there, and I feel like somehow they would still figure out a way to screw that up.
They would. And so let me ask you this: so, say the Wings do drop down to 5, okay? Mm-hmm. Are you going with whoever's left between Cousins and Dach, or are you going for the defenseman that we need too in Bowen Byram?
In terms of. I feel like for me, it's a pretty easy decision. I think personally, I'm going with the pick between the 2 centers. Like I said, you said before that you prefer Kirby Dach. I don't really necessarily have a preference. I think both will work really well. I think in terms of, I know that Dach does have a little bit of a size advantage over Cousins, which it's not necessarily it's not really a big deal, but. It's like an inch or whatever, and it's like 10 pounds or 9 pounds, however many it is. But like I said, I just think personally I'm going center there. I know the Red Wings have had issues on defense, and if the Red Wings hadn't landed Zadina last year, I would have loved to see them go with Quinn Hughes. But it's one of those things where Again, I don't really think there's too much of a difference there. Obviously, grabbing Byram wouldn't be, I would definitely not be upset with that pick at all whatsoever. But like I said, I think I'm kind of going center there. I'm either going Kirby Doc or Dylan Cousins. Personally, just because I think they can kind of get that solidified second center, which I think they lack. And, like I said, we've got some decent defensive prospects coming in, and there's obviously some good things. I know there's a lot of good defensemen that we could get, in the second round as well with those kind of 3 picks. So I'm not super concerned in terms of, I'm not in love with Bowen Byram. So I think in terms of kind of solidifying that second center role for the Red Wings, I think that's where I'm prioritizing there.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think part of it, too, is, for a defenseman, and you look at this rebuild right now, a lot of times high-end defensemen really don't come into their own until they're in their mid-20s, A guy like Cousins or Doc comes in, literally, if they don't come in the first year, they could be coming in, if they're developing at a rate like a guy like Veleno, I mean, you could see him as early as 2021. So, and make a meaningful contribution immediately, and it's not unheard of to get pretty far in the playoffs without, a true number one center. Like, if you've got a bunch of number twos, but you've got a dominant first and second center, that's probably more important. So yeah, I would say, if we're at 5, if that's where we go to, I think it's the same thing. You're picking one of these 2 centers, and you're not looking backwards.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of my mock, it has Vancouver taking Jack Hughes at 1, Arizona taking Capo Caco at 2, Podkolzin going 3 to the Kings, Dylan Cousins going at 4 to the Avalanche. So it basically the decision. This mock has Bowen Byram going to the Red Wings at 5. Personally, I would take Doc over Byram at 5. Obviously, because Cousins is off the board. If both of them are there, I think my decision is a little bit more tough. But I'm definitely taking Doc instead. It actually has the Anaheim Ducks taking Doc at 6, and then Zegras is going 7 to the Devils. Boldy is going at 8 to the Oilers. Turcotte is going 9 to Chicago, and then Peyton Krebs closes out the top 10, and he goes to the Rangers.
Yeah, I don't really see how the Red Wings don't have a crack at either Cousins or Doc unless Podkolzin somehow drops out of the top 3. You know what I mean? Which I find is hard, yeah. Those 3 seem pretty much locked in, especially Caco and Hughes where they're at. So, I mean, I think everyone was shocked that Zadina fell to us last year, so we got fortunate with that. I really didn't see Arizona taking Barrett Hayton where they did. That was a shock to me. That was a shock. We've been hearing a lot about Montreal wanting to go after Kotkaniemi and and obviously Svechnikov and Rasmus Dahlin weren't going to move from the number 1 and 2 pick, but
yeah, exactly.
But who knows? It could change by this time. I mean, by summertime, there could be some more. There could be some changes to this, but overall, I mean, I think if the Red Wings can stay in that top 5, we got a chance at getting a center for the future.
No, absolutely. And obviously out of the 3 centers, I'd obviously like to have Jack Hughes, but it's tough for me to think that the Red Wings get the first overall pick. So I'm definitely not complaining about getting a Capo Caco. Obviously he doesn't play center, but I'm having to compromise for Dylan Cousins or Kirby Doc. I'm definitely not complaining on that at all either. There's some good players going around for the Red Wings, and they have that that top 5 pick kind of solidified. I don't think they can fall below 5 at this point in the season, so they'll have a shot at most of the players that they want in the top 5, depending on if the lottery goes in their favor. We can only hope after last year that the lottery goes more in their favor. I know I was so frustrated, even though I'm from the Carolinas. Seeing the Hurricanes jump up to that number 2 and being able to get Svechnikov, as much as I would have loved to see, the Red Wings grab him and have him play with his brother here in Detroit. I mean, the lottery system, like I said, I've had some kind of issues with that, and just frustration with a lot of that. And Arizona being able to jump 11 spots up to number 2 is kind of, especially with how good Arizona is. They're not a bad club at all whatsoever. So them being able to jump in the number 2 spot is kind of for me. But again, the Red Wings have a lot of good opportunities here on their hand, and they can kind of draft what they're sort of looking for. I'm hoping that they're kind of going for that solid, center, that second center, kind of solidify that area there. But again, I'm not complaining if they get a Bowen Byram either. But
yeah, no, I think either way, it looks like a pretty good draft. But I'll tell you, I don't know if you've taken a look at the schedule that's left for the Red Wings. 17 games left. I don't see a lot of games in the schedule that scream to me like a really good chance to win. So I'm going to tell you, I mean, we play Colorado coming up here on Tuesday. That's our next game. Colorado's fighting for a playoff spot, still. Then you got New York, who they're not in the conversation. So that's a potential win. Tampa Bay, unless they fall,
they're gonna get steamrolled. Yeah,
unless they're falling asleep, I don't think we're looking at that as a win. Florida, so there's 2 wins possibly. Montreal, hopefully that, we'll just keep moving along. Tampa Bay again. Islanders, another Ranger game, so that's 3. So really, I would say out of the next 17 games, I'm gonna say we're lucky if we win about 7 of these.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough going forward. I think they've got a pretty difficult schedule coming up. So there's a couple of games that could go both ways, but you can kind of. You're not necessarily hoping for the Wings to tank per se, but it's definitely one of those things where it'd be nice. They definitely don't overtake that kind of last place position from Ottawa, because Ottawa's just so bad. But
I think you're going to see the seesaw back and forth between the Red Wings and the Kings for that second to last spot. I think that's kind of what's happening right now. I'm finding myself cheering for LA more so than I'm cheering for the Red Wings to lose, because I just have a hard time doing that.
No, I completely agree.
But I'm just hoping that LA finds like some sort of because they really didn't trade. I mean, they traded away Muzzin, but I mean they didn't trade away Toffoli. So I mean they still have most of their pieces from the trade deadline. So I'm hoping that they catch some fire here and they go on a winning streak.
Yeah, you can only hope, right? Because I hate rooting against the Red Wings, but I mean, being a Sharks fan, I think they just pulled 1 point ahead of the Red Wings. They have 56 now, I think, after their win last night. So, that's big for the Red Wings. I'm hoping they kind of can finish in that second to last spot. It'll be good for them going forward.
Well, we will get to see our friend Gus Nyquist in a Sharks uniform on March 25th.
Yes.
That's coming
on the
up.
25th.
So that'll be interesting.
That's a late game. That's that's in San Jose, so that's going to be a late game, 10:30. Yikes.
That's a road trip because they're playing in that Saturday against Vegas. So we've got some games to look forward to here. But I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm not feeling too comfortable about this game against the next 2 games against Tampa. That's kind of scary.
Oh yeah, I know. So. I know. I can't. I really don't like playing against Tampa. It's one of those. I don't necessarily hate Tampa, but it's just one of those things where I can't stand losing to them. It's one of those teams that seems to always have the Red Wings number, and obviously they're I don't really think the Red Wings have any shot of winning those games, unfortunately. I mean, the Lightning are just such a dominant hockey team. Tampa Bay, Steve Yzerman did such a good job running that franchise for such a long time, and they're just I mean, they're probably poised. I don't really see any other team that has a chance to win the cup. I can't necessarily say that. There's a lot, the playoffs are definitely interesting, and I know the Lightning are, have had a bad reputation in the past in the playoffs. They're not necessarily a playoff team, but, it'll be interesting to see going forward. But the Lightning are definitely my favorite to kind of win the cup. So, and
there's not that many teams that we're playing against in the next, bit here before the season ends that have nothing to play for. I mean, New York doesn't have much to play for. The Rangers, we got them 2 times. Florida, I don't see they really don't have a lot going on there. So those are 3 games right there that you could see the Red Wings really should be able to do something there. And New Jersey. New Jersey is kind of in the same boat as we are with this whole tankathon situation. They're at the bottom with us too. So, there's 4 games where you could look at and say, come on, these are prime opportunities to win a game. But when you're seeing, we got a lot of tough games coming up. So we'll see that the next time that we talk, kind of how we're doing here. But I think really what I want to see is Zadina get some good scoring opportunities. I want to see him get the ice time he needs to really get some confidence built up. I want to see AA. Let's see what he can do at center. If they're going to play him at center and they're going to give him the ice time, they're not going to bench him because he makes a mistake, then great. Give him a chance and see what he can do. I'm not convinced he's a center. I think he's a winger. I just don't think he's defensively responsible enough to play center consistently. But, there's still some things to watch. There's still some things to watch before the end of the season here.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. I mean, it's not all bad for the Red Wings going forward. They've got at least a little bit to look forward to. Hopefully, a couple wins kind of going in there, and the Red Wings are one of those teams where, regardless of the fact that they're kind of frustrating to watch, they're one of those teams that don't really give up. They kind of have that fighting attitude going forward, and and there's just something that I think a lot of times, like Dylan Larkin has shown that he's he kind of has that fiery attitude, and he's been able to, pull some things out of his hat and, make a lot of surprises for the Red Wings. They've won a lot of games, or at least come back in a lot of games recently that they probably shouldn't have been. They've had no reason to come back in. They had, that comeback against the Flyers and against Chicago as well, both of which I think they lost in overtime. But, it's still a fun effort to see the Red Wings kind of, not just like giving up, even though they're, their team is kind of in shambles, so to speak. So
it's going to be tough, but I'm curious to see if Cholowski makes his way back in the lineup at any time the rest of the year. I think they're kind of limited to how many more call-ups they can do, so I don't know what they're going to do with them. But, I'd really like to see Zadina have a good, strong 6 games to, for the end of his little audition. And I really would like to see both Cholowski and Hronek in the lineup at the same time. That's something I'm looking forward to, and I'm hoping that that happens. That's one thing I'm hoping to see is Cholowski. Let's see if the development in Grand Rapids is benefiting Cholowski to the point where they can justify bringing him back up and letting him and Hronek both play some meaningful minutes at the end of the season. Yeah.
And I know they've been basically saying, I'm not necessarily sure how, what to take from these rumors. I'm not really sure if they have to keep him down in order to keep him, in contention for the AHL playoffs. And, because I know they've already had to kind of send Zadina and them back down on paper. I think they've had to at least write that down, the fact that, to keep them in contention for the playoffs. So whether they call up Cholowski or not is still kind of up in the air, but it would definitely be interesting. I'd like to see him, possibly finish out the regular season on the main roster, because, at the end of the day, who really cares about the AHL playoffs? Honestly, it's really cool they won the Calder Cup back in 2017. They could probably contend again, but that was one of the reasons they kept Rasmussen up on the main roster. They were going to send him back into juniors to be eligible for the AHL playoffs. But what does that do for him?
Yeah,
really?
He's already proven.
Really do anything.
He's already proved. I think you give Rasmussen a full summer to train without the wrist issues that he's had in the last couple of years, and build up some more strength and use that frame of his. I think that's fine. I don't think you need to send him down, but I do think that a long playoff run for the Grand Rapids team is good for Cholowski and Hronek's confidence and experience. I agree. So I'm hoping that happens in Zadina, especially if Zadina can come out of those playoffs with, being an MVP of that team. That's huge for the Red Wings going into 2019-2020.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the, the only benefits of, I wouldn't necessarily the only benefits, but it's definitely a good thing for the playoffs for sure. And I definitely as much as Cholowski wouldn't, it would be nice to see him get some more time in the main roster and kind of build his game at NHL speed. It would definitely be good for his development, with Grand Rapids and stuff going forward. So definitely excited to see what the Red Wings do, kind of going, with these last couple of weeks kind of closing in. They'll finish around early April, and then we'll begin to cover some of the, we'll go more into the draft and talk about what they'll do in free agency and stuff. So that'll be exciting for going forward. But
sounds good.
We appreciate you guys tuning in this week to the podcast. I'm glad to be back. It's nice to have Jay on the podcast with us. So where can they find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, I am going to be under. It's at Warm Chord Music. So it's just at WARMCHORD Music. So that's, warmchordmusic.com is my website that I use for all my music stuff, and I run a podcast off there. So Warm Chord Music is the best way to find me on Twitter.
All right, and I am at Chase Sussex on Twitter, and you guys can also be sure to interact with the Hockeytown Rundown podcast on Twitter as well. We have a pretty active page going on over there, so be sure to check that out. And yeah, again, thank you for listening, and I'm super happy for the relaunch going forward, and I hope you guys are along for us with the ride. So with that being said, we're signing off.
Talk to you guys later.